The light March rain fell on the bulletproof glass of the black Mercedes as Robert Miller watched the movement on Wall Street from his 23rd floor office window. At 42, he had achieved everything a man could want. A tech company valued at millions, penthouses in 3 cities, and top-tier recognition in the financial market. But none of that mattered anymore. 6 months ago, his 5-year-old daughter, Haley, had woken up complaining of tingling in her legs. Within 2 weeks, she could no longer stand. The diagnoses came like successive blows, a rare degenerative neurological condition with no known cure. 17 doctors consulted, 4 international hospitals, and experimental treatments that cost the equivalent of 2 luxury condos. Nothing worked. Robert pushed the papers across his mahogany executive desk. Contracts that once made him euphoric now seemed like insignificant scribbles on expensive paper. His partner, Mark, had called 3 times that morning about a merger with a European multinational. He hadn't returned any of the calls. The intercom buzzed with the discreet sound that had cost $2,000 to install. Mrs. Gable, his secretary of 15 years, didn't wait for him to answer. "Mr. Miller, there is a boy down here at reception. He says he needs to speak with you urgently about Haley." Robert felt his stomach tighten. Journalists. It had to be some reporter trying to exploit the family tragedy for a sensationalist story. They had tried before when the news leaked in business circles. Have security remove him and find out how he got past the front desk. "Sir, he is 8 years old. He is a child, and he is barefoot." The information caught him off guard. Robert looked at the Swiss watch on his wrist, a birthday gift from his wife, Sarah. 3 in the afternoon, on a rainy Tuesday. What was a barefoot child doing in the heart of Manhattan? Let him up. The decision left his mouth before he could rationalize it. Perhaps it was exhaustion, perhaps curiosity, or perhaps a tiny spark of hope he thought he had buried along with the dreams of seeing his daughter run again. 5 minutes later, the office door opened and Mrs. Gable entered, accompanied by a thin boy with sun-kissed skin, messy hair, and clothes that had been patched more than once. The boy held an old leather-bound notebook against his chest. His dark eyes, however, shone with an intensity Robert didn't expect to find in someone so young and visibly vulnerable. "That will be all, Mrs. Gable." "Thank you." The secretary hesitated, casting a protective look at the boy before leaving and closing the door. Robert studied the unexpected visitor. The boy showed no intimidation in the face of the luxurious office, the shelves of imported books, or the Persian rug that cost more than many families earn in a year. He simply stood there, holding the notebook as if it were the most precious object in the world. "How do you know my daughter's name?" "I saw you with her at St. Jude's Hospital 3 weeks ago. My aunt works on the cleaning crew there. You carried her in your arms to the car and she was crying, asking to walk. I never forgot her face." Robert felt his throat tighten at the memory. That day, Haley had tried to take a few steps alone during physical therapy and fell. Her crying had echoed through the entire hallway. "And what do you want? Did your aunt send you here to ask for money?" The question came out harsher than he intended, but years of dealing with scammers and opportunists had hardened his reactions. The boy was unfazed. "My name is Gabriel. I can help your daughter walk again." The silence that followed was as thick as fog. Robert blinked, trying to process if he had heard correctly. Then a bitter laugh escaped his lips. "You can help. A barefoot boy who probably hasn't even finished elementary school can do what 17 specialists with doctorates on 3 continents couldn't." Gabriel opened the notebook and placed it on Robert's desk without asking permission. The yellowed pages were filled with notes in old-fashioned cursive, drawings of plants, diagrams of the human body with marked points and handwritten recipes. "My grandmother was a midwife and a healer in Brooklyn. She took care of people the hospitals gave up on. When I was 5, she started teaching me everything she knew. She said I had the gift in my hands that I could feel where the body's energy was stuck." Robert picked up the notebook, flipping through it with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. There were recipes for baths with rosemary, mint, and other herbs he didn't recognize. Instructions on massaging specific points on the feet, hands, and spine. anatomical drawings that were surprisingly precise for someone without medical training. And your grandmother? Where is she now? She passed away 2 years ago, but before she did, she made me promise I would use what I learned to help anyone who needed it, especially children. The boy's voice didn't tremble when speaking of the loss, but Robert noticed how his fingers gripped the edge of the notebook a little tighter. Look, Gabriel, I understand you want to help, and I respect that your grandmother taught you these things. But my daughter has a serious neurological condition. It's not a cold you cure with herbal tea. The businessman stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the city continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the personal dramas of each individual. Have you already spent all the money you had on doctors? The direct question caught him off guard. It's none of your business. But yes, I sold 2 properties and took out loans. Then you have nothing to lose by letting me try. I don't want money. I just want your daughter to have the chance to run that I never had. Robert turned, facing the boy. There was something in the simplicity of that logic that dismantled all his rational defenses. Why did you never have a chance to run? Gabriel lowered his eyes for the first time. I lived under the Brooklyn Bridge with my grandmother. When she passed, I went to a shelter. We have a roof and food there, but there's no yard, no space. We only run when we're running away from something bad. The brutal honesty of that confession hit Robert like a silent punch. He had spent the last few months so absorbed in his own pain that he had forgotten there were people in the world fighting battles he couldn't even imagine. Even if I wanted to accept your help, my wife would never allow it. She is traumatized by everything Haley has already been through. She won't want to expose our daughter to another treatment without scientific proof. Then, let me meet Haley first. No treatment, no promises. Just talk. If she doesn't like me, I'll leave and you'll never see me again. Robert should have said no. All his business decisions were based on data, analysis, and calculated risks. Nothing in that proposal made logical sense. But when he looked at Gabriel, he saw something that money hadn't been able to buy in 6 months. Genuine hope. All right, but on one condition. You come to dinner at our house tomorrow. If Haley shows any discomfort or fear, you leave immediately and don't push it further. Deal? Deal. Gabriel extended his right hand. His palm was calloused, marked by work no child should know. Robert shook that small hand and felt something strange, a warmth that didn't come from temperature, but from something deeper. That night, Robert arrived home and found Sarah sitting next to Haley's wheelchair, reading a storybook about flying princesses. The girl had her eyes closed, but she wasn't sleeping. She was just pretending, as she had been doing lately when the stories got too sad. Sarah, I need to talk to you. Sarah looked up. At 38, she was still beautiful, but the suffering of the last few months had left marks. Permanent dark circles, worry lines, and a stiffness in her shoulders that never fully relaxed. If it's about the German doctor your partner suggested, I already said no. I'm not dragging Haley halfway across the world to hear another no. It's not about that. It's about a boy who showed up at my office today. Robert told the story, omitting the details he knew would make Sarah refuse immediately. Gabriel's age, his living conditions, the unconventional nature of the methods. He focused on the boy's sincerity, the grandmother's notebook, and the proposal of just a conversation. Sarah remained silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing absent patterns on the blanket covering Haley's motionless legs. You've lost your mind, Robert. You've definitely lost it. He waited. He had known his wife for 15 years. He knew when she was rejecting an idea and when she was just processing it. But Haley heard everything. I want to meet the boy. Both voices turned to the child in the wheelchair. Haley had opened her eyes and was now looking directly at her father with the intensity she had inherited from him. Sweetie, were you awake this whole time? I'm always awake. Pretending to sleep is better than seeing you two sad. The confession broke both parents' hearts. Sarah knelt beside the chair, holding her daughter's small hands. Honey, we aren't sad. We're just... I know you are, and I am too. But if there's a boy who wants to try to help me, why not let him? What's the worst that could happen? I stay unable to walk? I already can't walk anyway. The childish logic, so similar to Gabriel's hours earlier, silenced any objection Sarah might have had. That was how, the following night, Gabriel climbed the steps of the Miller mansion on the Upper East Side, still barefoot, but in clean clothes Robert had ordered during the day. The boy held his grandmother's notebook and a small cloth bag of herbs. When Haley saw him, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in months, she truly smiled. "You're the healing boy," she said, with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "And you're the girl who's going to walk again," Gabriel replied, with the same unshakable conviction. In that moment, surrounded by Sarah's skepticism and Robert's restrained hope, something began. It wasn't an instant miracle. It wasn't magic. It was simply the beginning of a journey that would change not just one life, but 4. The first session took place in the living room, under the watchful eye of Sarah, who had positioned her reading chair at a distance that allowed her to observe every movement without being invasive. Robert sat on the Italian leather sofa, pretending to read emails on his tablet, but his eyes never left his daughter. Haley was lying on a mat Gabriel had asked them to place on the floor. The boy had explained that the wheelchair, though necessary, created a psychological barrier he needed to break. "First, we need to talk to your body," Gabriel said, opening his grandmother's notebook to a page marked with a piece of faded red ribbon. "My grandmother used to say the body holds memories. Sometimes it forgets how to do things because it's afraid of feeling pain again." Haley looked at her own legs, covered in pink sweatpants with unicorn designs. "My legs are afraid? All parts of our body have feelings. Your knee remembers when you fell and got hurt, so it stays tense. Your spine remembers when it ached, so it locks up. We're going to teach your body to remember good things." Gabriel dipped his hand into the cloth bag and pulled out a sprig of fresh rosemary. The aroma spread through the room immediately, mixing with the expensive air freshener Sarah used. "That smells like Grandma's cooking," Haley commented, surprised. "That's because many people use it for cooking. But rosemary also serves to wake up the body, to remind it that it's alive." The boy began to pass the sprig lightly over Haley's arms, then over her legs, in slow circular motions. It wasn't a massage. It was almost like a caress, too delicate to cause any discomfort. Sarah shifted in her chair, about to intervene, but Robert made a discreet gesture with his hand, asking for patience. Something in Gabriel's concentration, in the way he worked with total respect for the girl's space, reassured the worried mother. "Now I'm going to touch some points on your feet. It might hurt a little bit, but it's a good pain, like when you stretch after being still for a long time. If it gets too bad, you tell me and I'll stop. Deal?" "Deal." Gabriel positioned his fingers on a specific spot on the sole of Haley's right foot and pressed gently. The girl gave a small jump. "I felt it. Daddy, Mommy, I felt it." The emotion in her voice made Sarah put her hand to her mouth, trying to contain her tears. Robert stood up from the sofa, moving closer. "Did you feel pain or tingling?" Gabriel asked, his voice sounding far too professional for a child. "Tingling. Like when my leg used to fall asleep before it got like this." "That's very good. It means your body is responding. The nerves are waking up." For 40 minutes, Gabriel worked methodically, alternating between stimulating reflex points and gentle stretching movements. He explained each step, not just to Haley, but to the parents who watched with a mixture of fascination and incredulity. When the session ended, Haley was tired but excited in a way Sarah hadn't seen in months. The boy helped her back into her wheelchair, ensuring she was comfortable before packing his herbs and closing the notebook. "Tomorrow we continue. For now, you need to rest. Your body did a lot of work today, even if you didn't notice." After Gabriel left, driven by Robert's chauffeur back to the shelter where he lived, Sarah confronted her husband in the kitchen while they prepared Haley's dinner. "Robert, you saw her face. She's hopeful again. What if this doesn't work?" What if it's just a placebo effect or imagination? What if it does work? The question silenced Sarah. She stirred the tomato sauce harder than necessary. 17 doctors, Robert. 17 trained professionals with years of study said it's irreversible. How can an 8-year-old boy with no formal training make a difference? I don't know. But our other options are gone. And Gabriel isn't charging anything. He isn't promising miracles or selling false hope. He's just trying. Sarah turned off the stove and faced her husband. Fine. Let's give it a chance. But the first time I notice Haley getting worse or suffering, this ends, no matter how much she begs. Robert agreed, sealing the deal with a kiss on his wife's forehead. The following weeks established a routine. Gabriel arrived every day at 4 p.m. after finishing his chores at the shelter. The sessions lasted between 40 minutes and an hour, always with Haley on the mat, always with Gabriel patiently explaining every movement. On the 10th day, something happened that changed the dynamics of the house. Haley managed to move her left toes voluntarily. Sarah was preparing a snack in the kitchen when she heard the screams coming from the living room. She dropped everything and ran, imagining the worst, but found Haley crying with joy while Gabriel held her foot, smiling as if he had conquered the world. "Mom, look at my toe." And there it was, the pinky toe of her left foot moving up and down, a tiny movement that represented a universe of possibilities. Sarah fell to her knees beside her daughter, laughing and crying at the same time. Robert, who had arrived early from work for the first time in months, stood in the doorway watching the scene, unable to form words. That night, after Haley fell asleep clutching the teddy bear she hadn't let go of since she was a baby, Robert called Gabriel for a talk in the library. The boy examined the shelves filled with books with wide eyes. "Have you read all of these?" "Most of them. Some are more for decoration than reading," Robert admitted with a smile. "Gabriel, I wanted to talk about your situation at the shelter." The boy immediately went on the defensive. "I'm not asking for money. I already said I don't want anything in return." "I know, but you're coming here every day, dedicating hours to Haley. How is your school life? Your other activities?" Gabriel shrugged. "School is in the morning. In the afternoon, I help in the shelter kitchen. But Mrs. Vera, who takes care of us, she lets me leave to come here. She knew my grandmother and knows this is important." Robert sat in his favorite reading chair, gesturing for Gabriel to take the other one. "What if I proposed something different? What if, instead of you coming and going every day, you stayed here? We have plenty of rooms. You would have your own space. You'd continue helping Haley, and we could ensure you have everything you need to study as well." The offer left Gabriel paralyzed. His eyes scanned the luxurious library, the velvet curtains, the soft rug under his bare feet. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're bringing my daughter back. Not just physically, but emotionally. She's smiling again. She has hope again. That's priceless. And because I see in you something that reminds me why I built all of this. Before I got lost in business and forgot that money is meant to create opportunities. But I'm not part of your family. Not yet." The word hung in the air like a promise. Gabriel looked at his own hands. Those hands his grandmother had said carried a gift. "I need to think. And talk to Mrs. Vera. Of course, there's no rush. The offer stands." 3 days later, Gabriel showed up with a small backpack containing all his possessions. 3 changes of clothes, his grandmother's notebook, a broken toy car he had fixed, and a faded photo of an elderly woman with a kind smile. Sarah prepared the guest room next to Haley's. She had bought new sheets, a navy blue comforter, and even some clothes she imagined would be Gabriel's size. When the boy saw it all, his legs trembled, and he had to sit on the bed. "Is all of this for me?" "All yours," Sarah confirmed, sitting beside him. "Gabriel, I need to be honest with you. When you first showed up, I thought Robert was crazy. I thought you were taking advantage of our desperation. But you proved me wrong. You have something special, something that goes beyond technique or knowledge. You have heart. Gabriel hugged the backpack against his chest. My grandmother used to say that healing isn't in the hands, it's in the intention. We can have all the right herbs, all the knowledge, but if we don't have love, it doesn't work. Your grandmother was a wise woman. That night, for the first time in the 2 years since he had lost his grandmother, Gabriel slept in a real bed between clean sheets in a warm room. And for the first time in 6 months, Robert and Sarah slept without that crushing weight of helplessness. But not everything would be peaceful days. A week after Gabriel moved into the mansion, Haley's physical therapist, Dr. Beatrice Foster, showed up for the weekly session she held with the girl. Beatrice was a renowned professional, a graduate of Columbia with a master's in neurological rehabilitation. She had been one of the few people who never completely gave up on Haley, even when the prognosis seemed irreversible. Upon entering the living room and seeing Gabriel working with Haley, Beatrice stopped in her tracks. What is going on here? Sarah, who was supervising, quickly explained the situation. With every word, Beatrice's expression grew more tense. Are you telling me you put a boy with no training to perform manipulations on a child with a serious neurological condition? Do you realize how irresponsible that is? But it's working. Robert intervened, showing the tablet with the video of Haley moving her toes. She's regaining sensitivity. Beatrice watched the video with professional attention, her face a mask of skepticism. That could be involuntary muscle spasms. You need tests, proper medical follow-up, not... She looked at Gabriel, searching for the right word. Not folk healing. Gabriel, who had remained silent until then, calmly closed his grandmother's notebook and stood up. You can stay and watch if you like. My grandmother always said that true knowledge isn't afraid of being seen. The proposal disarmed Beatrice. She hesitated, looking from Robert to Sarah, hoping one of them would be sensible and put an end to it. When she realized that wouldn't happen, she took a deep breath and grabbed her notepad. Fine, I'll observe. But if I see anything that could hurt Haley, I'm stopping this immediately. Gabriel simply nodded and returned his attention to the girl, who was eager to start. Throughout the session, Beatrice took meticulous notes. She observed the points Gabriel stimulated, the pressure he applied, the angles of the stretches. When Gabriel used a foot bath with warm water and mint before working on the reflexes, she leaned forward, fascinated despite herself. At the end, when Haley managed not just to move her toes, but to lift her foot slightly off the floor, Beatrice dropped her pen. How do you know these points? Some of them correspond to acupressure techniques I studied in a specialization course in Japan. My grandmother learned from her grandmother, who learned from hers. She said this knowledge comes from before books. Beatrice looked at the notebook on the coffee table. May I see? Gabriel looked at Robert, who nodded affirmatively. The boy handed over the notebook with care, like someone handing over a treasure. Beatrice spent the next hour flipping through the yellowed pages, her expression changing from skepticism to surprise, and from surprise to admiration. There was a mapping of the human body that combined folk wisdom with intuitions that echoed modern medicine. This is extraordinary, she whispered. Some of these techniques are used in top-tier rehabilitation clinics in Europe, but here it's described in such a simple, intuitive way. She closed the notebook carefully and returned it to Gabriel. I was wrong to judge before observing. But I need to say one thing. What you are doing is risky, not because of the technique, but because of the lack of proper monitoring. Gabriel has a gift, that's undeniable, but he needs to work in conjunction with medical protocols, not replacing them. That was how an unlikely partnership was born. Beatrice began coming 3 times a week instead of 1, coordinating her sessions with Gabriel's. She taught the boy technical terms, explaining the anatomy behind what his grandmother called energy points. Gabriel, in turn, showed the physical therapist variations of movements that weren't in any academic manual. Haley flourished at the center of this collaboration. Every day, a small bit of progress. A muscle that responded, a joint that moved, a sensation that returned. But the true test was yet to come, and it would come in a way no one expected. Autumn arrived, bringing cooler mornings and golden afternoons that bathed the mansion's gardens in soft light. 2 months had passed since Gabriel moved into the Miller home, and the routine had established itself with a harmony that surprised everyone. Haley could now sit up without support for up to 20 minutes, her back sustaining her own weight in a way the doctors had said was impossible. The muscles in her legs, previously completely atrophied, were beginning to show definition again. But the most notable progress was in her spirit. The girl who had lost the sparkle in her eyes now laughed easily, made plans for the future, and drew pictures of herself running. Robert arrived home early on a Friday, carrying a bag from the best toy store in the city. Inside was a doll Haley had mentioned wanting weeks ago. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner, but she was no longer the tense, exhausted figure of previous months. She hummed an old song while seasoning the chicken. "Where are the kids?" Robert asked, using the plural, a word that still sounded strange to him but increasingly natural. "In the living room." Beatrice arrived 20 minutes ago. Today is the monthly evaluation day. Robert found Beatrice kneeling beside the mat where Haley was lying, with Gabriel sitting on the other side. The physical therapist held a reflex tester, that small hammer used to test neurological reflexes. "Let's try again, Haley. Relax your leg and let me test the knee reflex." Beatrice tapped lightly just below the kneecap. Haley's leg moved in a perfect reflex kick. The physical therapist repeated the test 3 times, always with the same result. "Impossible," she whispered, making frantic notes on her clipboard. "The femoral nerve is responding perfectly. 2 months ago, this reflex was non-existent." "Is it good?" Haley asked, anxious. "It's extraordinary. Your nervous system is reconnecting, not just improving, but effectively rebuilding itself." Gabriel smiled, that discreet smile he always gave when his techniques worked, as if he never doubted they would. "Tomorrow we start different exercises," he told Haley. "We're going to work on getting you to stand with support." Already, but Dr. Beatrice said that would take at least another month. Beatrice looked at Gabriel with an expression that mixed admiration and professional frustration. Under normal conditions, yes, but nothing about this treatment is normal. "Gabriel, are you sure she's ready?" "I am. Her body is asking for the next step. I feel it in the muscle tension, in the way she responds to the stretches." Robert watched the scene with a tightness in his chest. Just 6 months ago, he was prepared to accept that Haley would never leave that wheelchair. Now, they were talking about her standing up. That night, after Haley fell asleep and Gabriel retired to his room to study, Robert and Sarah stood on the back porch, watching the stars timidly appearing among the city lights. "I was thinking," Robert began, holding his wife's hand, "about Gabriel, about making it official." Sarah turned to face him. "You're talking about adoption." It wasn't a question. "He's already part of the family, Sarah. Haley calls him her brother. He eats at our table, sleeps under our roof. Why not make it permanent?" Sarah was silent, her fingers tracing nervous patterns on the fabric of her dress. "Robert, I love that boy. Truly. He brought our daughter back, brought joy to this house. But adoption is forever. It's a commitment that goes beyond gratitude." "I know. And that's exactly why I want to do it. It's not gratitude, Sarah. It's love. He taught me that being a father isn't about blood or DNA. It's about being present, about caring, about wanting the best for someone even when it's hard." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "He's already suffered so much. He lost his grandmother, lived in a shelter. What if he doesn't want to? What if he feels it's an obligation because of everything he did for Haley?" Then we ask him, honestly, and we respect his answer, whatever it is. 3 days later, on a rainy Sunday, Robert called Gabriel to the library. The boy entered with his grandmother's notebook under his arm, as he always did, a habit he never abandoned. "Gabriel, sit down. I need to talk to you about something important." The serious tone made the boy immediately alert. Robert recognized the expression. It was the same one Gabriel had when he was prepared for bad news, for rejection, for loss. A defense that vulnerable children develop too early. It's nothing bad, Robert hurried to reassure him. In fact, I hope it's something very good. He took a deep breath. Sarah and I would like to start the adoption process. We would like you to become our son, legally and forever. Gabriel blinked, processing the words as if they were in a foreign language. Adoption? Like a real son? A real son. With our last name, a new birth certificate, everything. You would have the same rights as Haley, the same family, the same future. The notebook slipped from Gabriel's hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. The boy looked at his own hands, those hands that had healed, comforted, and cared. But I'm not your blood. I'm just a boy who showed up and you saved our family, Gabriel. And in the process, you became part of it. Not because you had to be, but because we all chose for it to be. Haley chose you as a brother. Sarah chose you as a son. And I chose you as my boy. The tears came then, silent and abundant, streaming down Gabriel's face as years of abandonment, loneliness, and uncertainty finally found a safe harbor. Can I keep my grandmother's last name too? I don't want to forget her. Of course. Gabriel Santos Miller. Has a good ring to it, doesn't it? The boy threw himself into Robert's arms, hugging him with the strength of someone who finally believed he wouldn't be left behind. Robert held that small body and felt something heal within himself, something he didn't even know was broken. When they told Haley, the girl let out screams of joy so loud the neighbor called, worried something had happened. Beatrice, who was present for the day's session, had to wipe her own eyes before congratulating the new family. The following months were a time of profound transformation. Gabriel began having private tutoring in the afternoons, discovering a natural talent for biology and anatomy that surprised no one. Robert enrolled him in a private school, where the boy initially felt out of place among classmates who talked about international trips and expensive gadgets, but his intelligence and unique story soon won him respect and genuine friends. Haley continued to progress. On her 6th birthday, she managed to stand up holding a support bar Robert had installed in the living room. It was only 15 seconds, but they were the most celebrated 15 seconds in that house. Beatrice brought neurologist colleagues to observe the case. Some remained skeptical, attributing the recovery to an incorrect initial diagnosis. Others admitted, with academic reluctance, that they were witnessing something they couldn't fully explain with conventional science. But the harmony was broken on a November afternoon. Gabriel was working with Haley when he noticed something different. The girl was more tense than usual. Her responses to the exercises were inconsistent. He stopped the session and sat beside her. What's going on? Are you afraid of something? Haley looked at her brother with tears in her eyes. What if I start walking again and you don't need to stay here anymore? What if Mommy and Daddy only adopted you because I was sick? Her fear hit Gabriel like a physical blow. He held his sister's small hands. Haley, look at me. I'm not here because you need treatment. I'm here because this is my family now. You could walk tomorrow, you could run a marathon a year from now, and I'd still be here. Because I love you as a sister, not as a patient. Promise? Promise. And if you ever doubt it again, I'll remind you as many times as it takes. The conversation changed something in Haley. In the following weeks, she threw herself into the exercises with a new determination. No longer motivated by the fear of losing her family, but by the desire to live fully. It was on a Monday, 3 days before Christmas, that the moment happened that would change everything. Gabriel was helping Haley with balance exercises at the support bar. Sarah was preparing gingerbread cookies in the kitchen, filling the house with the aroma of cinnamon and spices. Robert was in his home office, pretending to work, but actually watching through the cracked door. Haley held the bar with both hands while Gabriel stabilized her hips. She had managed to sustain her own weight for almost a minute when, suddenly, she let go with one hand. Gabriel, look, only one hand. Careful, don't push it too hard, he warned. But he was smiling. Haley, intoxicated by success and adrenaline, made a decision that would change the course of that day. She let go with the other hand. For one miraculous second, she stood alone, without support, her muscles trembling with the effort but holding. Then, inevitably, her legs gave way. What happened next was in slow motion. Haley began to fall. Gabriel dove to catch her, but the girl hit her knee hard on the corner of the support bar before he could reach her. The scream of pain brought Sarah running from the kitchen and Robert down the stairs 3 steps at a time. They found Gabriel on the floor holding Haley, who was crying inconsolably, her knee already starting to swell. What happened? Sarah practically screamed, taking her daughter from Gabriel's arms. She wanted to try alone. I tried to catch her, but you should have been holding her. The whole time! What's the point of you being here if you can't even protect my daughter? Sarah's words, born of fear and not reason, cut Gabriel deeper than any physical wound could. The boy backed away, his face a mask of pain. Sarah, it was an accident. Robert tried to intervene, but his wife was already in full protective mode. Accident? She was progressing so well and now she's hurt. What if she's afraid to try again? What if this sets back months of progress? Robert took Haley to the hospital, accompanied by Sarah, who cast a look at Gabriel before leaving, a look the boy interpreted as guilt and disappointment. Beatrice, who had just arrived for the daily session, found Gabriel sitting alone in the living room, staring at his grandmother's notebook open in his lap. Gabriel, I ruined everything. You were right from the beginning. I don't have proper training. I don't know what I'm doing. I hurt Haley. The physical therapist sat beside him. You didn't hurt anyone. Haley made an impulsive choice because she was excited about her progress. Accidents happen in any rehabilitation treatment. I've seen much worse falls in clinics with state-of-the-art equipment and full medical supervision. Gabriel closed the notebook carefully. Mrs. Miller is angry with me. She thinks I shouldn't be here. Sarah is afraid. There's a huge difference. When she calms down, she'll realize that. But Gabriel wasn't convinced. That night, he packed his few possessions in his old backpack, placed his grandmother's notebook on top, and wrote a short letter that he left on the impeccably made bed. When Robert and Sarah returned from the hospital at 11 at night, bringing a Haley with a bandaged but structurally unharmed knee, they found the house in silence. Sarah went straight to check on Gabriel, needing to apologize for her emotional outburst. What she found was the empty room and the letter. Robert read aloud, his voice cracking at the final words. I never wanted to hurt Helen. She's my sister, and I love her. But maybe Mrs. Mary is right. Maybe I'm not prepared enough to help. I'm going back to the shelter. Please don't look for me. Thank you for everything you did for me. I'll never forget it. Gabriel. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Helen crying in the next room. Where's Gabriel? I want Gabriel. Mary sank onto the bed, the weight of what her words had caused hitting her with full force. What have I done, Robert? What have I done? The night dragged on in agony. Robert called the children's home at 6 a.m, waking the director, Mrs. Vera, who confirmed that Gabriel had shown up around midnight, soaked by the rain that had started to fall, asking for his old bunk back. He said he didn't want to talk about what happened. He just asked to be left alone for a while. You need to come get this boy, Robert. He belongs to you now. But Mary wasn't sure if Gabriel would even want to come back. She spent the night awake, rereading his letter over and over, every word an accusation of her own fear turned into cruelty. Helen refused to eat breakfast. She pushed away the plate of pancakes, her favorite, and crossed her arms. I'm not doing any more exercises until Gabriel comes back. Honey, you have to keep up with your treatment. Your knee is fine. It was just a scare. It's not about my knee, Mom. It's about you sending my brother away. The words hit Mary like stones. Robert placed a hand on his wife's shoulder in a silent gesture of support. I didn't send him away, Helen. I was scared, and I said things I shouldn't have. But we're going to bring him back. What if he doesn't want to come back? What if he thinks we don't really love him? The question echoed Mary's secret fear. At 9 in the morning, Robert and Mary pulled up in front of St. Anthony's Children's Home. It was an old but well-kept building with faded yellow walls and a small courtyard where a few children were playing despite the morning chill. Mrs. Vera met them at the door with an expression that mixed understanding and disapproval. "He's in his room. Third door on the left, second floor. But I'm warning you, the boy has built a high wall around himself since yesterday." They climbed the creaking stairs, passing through hallways that smelled of laundry detergent and home-cooked meals. Mary thought about how Gabriel had lived there, sharing a room with 5 other boys with no privacy, no space of his own. And yet, when he was given the chance at a different life, he accepted it with gratitude, without any resentment for his past. They knocked on the door. Silence. Robert knocked again. "Gabriel, it's me. Please let us in." Another long pause, then slow footsteps, and the door opened just a crack. Gabriel was wearing the same clothes from the day before, wrinkled from sleeping in them. His eyes were red, but dry. "What do you want?" The coldness in such a young voice broke Mary's heart. "We want to take you home," she said, her voice breaking. "I was wrong, Gabriel. I was so wrong. I said terrible things born out of fear, not the truth. You didn't hurt Helen. You saved her. And you're saving our whole family every single day." Gabriel looked at the floor. "I can't do this anymore. Every time something goes wrong, you're going to doubt me. You're going to think I'm not good enough." Robert knelt down to be at eye level with the boy. "Real families make mistakes, Gabriel. We're going to disagree. We're going to hurt each other with words. We're going to have hard days. But the difference is that we don't give up. We apologize, we learn, and we stay together. That's what makes a family real, not perfect." "But I'm not really your son. You are my son," Mary interrupted, stepping into the room and kneeling beside Robert. "You might not have been born from my body, but you were born from my heart the day you entered our lives. When Helen fell, I wasn't angry at you. I was terrified of losing the daughter I had just gotten back. But I didn't realize I was risking losing you too." The tears finally came, silent but heavy, sliding down the boy's face. "Helen is really mad at me. She said she won't do her exercises anymore. That's not true. She said she won't do them without you. She needs her brother." Gabriel looked at the bunk bed where he had slept for 2 years, at the old backpack with his few possessions, at his grandmother's notebook that never left his side. Then he looked at Robert and Mary, and he saw in them not pity or obligation, but genuine, imperfect love. "Can I really come back?" "You should never have left," Robert said, pulling the boy into a hug. "We are your family, Gabriel. Forever, through the good days and the bad." The drive back home was quiet, but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of wounds beginning to heal, of bridges being rebuilt. When they entered the house, Helen was sitting on the living room sofa, still in her pajamas, refusing to change until her brother returned. Seeing Gabriel, she tried to stand up on her own in a burst of excitement, but Mary caught her. "Easy, sweetie. Let Gabriel come to you." Gabriel crossed the room and knelt in front of his sister. He took her small hands. "I'm sorry I didn't catch you right yesterday. It wasn't your fault. I was just too excited and silly, but my knee is already better, look." She flexed her leg carefully, showing her range of motion. "Even so, from now on, we're going to be more careful. Not because I'm afraid of you falling, but because I want it to be perfect when you walk on your own for the first time." Helen hugged her brother tightly. "I love you, Gabriel. You're the best brother in the world. I love you too, kiddo." That night, the family had dinner together for the first time in days. Mary had prepared Gabriel's favorite meal, a special pot roast and cornbread he had once mentioned his grandmother used to make. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. During the meal, Robert announced a decision. "I'm going to cut back my hours at the office. I'll be working from home 3 days a week. I realized I almost lost what really matters because I was so focused on things that don't make a difference in the end." Mary nodded in agreement. "And I'm going to start painting again." Before we had Helen, I loved to paint. I stopped because I thought I didn't have time. But the truth is, I was afraid of being happy with anything other than being the perfect mother. Gabriel looked at his adoptive parents with admiration. My grandma always said that wounds teach us where we need to grow. I think what happened taught us how to be more honest with each other. The following weeks brought a new dynamic. Beatrice began to formally document Helen's treatment, with the family's permission, planning to present the case at a neurological rehabilitation conference. She was working in full collaboration with Gabriel now, no longer with skepticism, but with genuine scientific curiosity. One day, she brought a proposal. I'd like to formally study the methods in your grandmother's notebook, Gabriel. With your permission, of course. I think there's ancestral knowledge here that could benefit many people if it's properly documented and taught. Gabriel looked at the notebook, his most precious treasure. My grandma always wanted this knowledge to help as many people as possible. But there's one condition. It has to be taught with love, not just as a technique, because without love, it doesn't work. Beatrice reached out her hand. Deal. I will treat this knowledge with the respect and care it deserves. A routine was established where Gabriel taught his techniques to Beatrice, who translated them into medical language and tested their effectiveness within scientific protocols. The physical therapist was amazed at how Gabriel's simple explanations of energy flow and tension points corresponded to complex concepts in neurology and anatomy. Helen continued to progress. Her knee healed completely from the fall, and she returned to her exercises with renewed determination. The incident had taught everyone about limits, patience, and the importance of celebrating every step without forcing the next one too soon. In February, 4 months after Gabriel moved in, Helen managed to take 3 steps while holding onto the support bar before her legs gave out. It wasn't much, but it was a universe of difference from where she had started. One afternoon, Robert received the call they had been waiting for months. The adoption process had been approved. Gabriel Miller was now, officially and legally, the son of Robert and Mary Miller, and the brother of Helen Miller. The news was celebrated with a special dinner where Mary served all of Gabriel's favorite dishes. Mrs. Vera was invited and brought a framed photo of Gabriel's grandmother, which would now have a place of honor in the family's living room. Your grandmother would be proud, Mrs. Vera said, hugging the boy, not just for what you do, but for the man you are becoming. That night, before going to sleep, Gabriel opened his grandmother's notebook to a page he had marked a long time ago. It was a message she had written to him, dated just a few days before she passed away. My dear grandson, if you are reading this, it means I have gone. Do not cry for me, for I lived well and loved much. The knowledge I pass to you is not just about healing bodies, but about healing souls. Always remember, the greatest healings happen when we recognize that we need each other. You will find your family, Gabriel. It won't be the one you were born into, but the one that chooses you. And when you find them, hold on tight. With eternal love, Grandma. Gabriel closed the notebook with tears in his eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. His grandmother had predicted it all: the loneliness, the search, and finally, the belonging. In the next room, Helen was secretly practicing an exercise Beatrice had taught her. She wanted to surprise Gabriel on his upcoming birthday. She had a plan, a secret she was keeping with her parents' help. And in the living room, Robert and Mary looked at old and new photos side by side. In all the recent ones, there was an element missing from the old ones. Genuine smiles, the kind that can't be forced or faked. We really are a family now, Mary said, leaning her head on her husband's shoulder. We always were. We just needed Gabriel to show us. The journey was far from over. Helen still had a long way to go, and Gabriel was just beginning to discover the extent of his gift. But they were walking together now, and that made all the difference. What none of them knew was that the greatest challenge and the greatest revelation was yet to come. And it would come in a way that would test not only Helen's physical strength, but the entire family's faith in the power of unity. March brought the first signs of spring. The trees in the garden began to bloom, filling the air with the scent of jasmine and lavender that Mary had planted years ago. Gabriel would turn 9 in 2 weeks, and Helen was determined to give her brother the best gift possible, herself standing up. Beatrice had intensified the sessions, working with Gabriel on a protocol that combined his ancestral techniques with progressive muscle-strengthening exercises. Helen trained 4 hours a day, broken into periods so as not to overload her recovering body. But there was something neither Beatrice nor Gabriel knew. Helen was doing extra exercises hidden in her room late at night when everyone was asleep. She used the headboard of her bed as a support bar, trying to stand up on her own, repeating the movements she had learned during the day. It was on one of those nights that Mary, passing through the hallway on her way to the kitchen for water, heard a noise coming from her daughter's room. She opened the door silently and found Helen holding onto the headboard, sweating, trying to pull herself up from the bed. "Helen, what are you doing?" The girl was startled and lost her balance, but Mary rushed over and caught her before she fell. "I was practicing, Mom. I want to walk on." Gabriel's birthday. I want him to see that all his effort was worth it. Mary sat on the bed, pulling her daughter into her lap. "Sweetheart, you can't do this alone. What if you get hurt? Remember what happened last time you tried to rush things? But this time is different. I feel like I can do it, Mom. My legs are stronger. I just need to try." Helen's eyes shone with determination, and Mary saw there no longer the fragile girl who needed to be protected from everything, but a young warrior who deserved the chance to fight her own battles, all right. But you're not going to do this alone. Tomorrow, we'll tell Gabriel and Beatrice about your plan, and if they agree that you're ready, we'll work together to make it happen. Safely. Deal? Helen hesitated, but then agreed. The relief of no longer having to keep that secret alone was visible on her face. The next morning during breakfast, Helen made her announcement. "I want to walk on Gabriel's birthday. No wheelchair, no support bar. I want to walk across the room on my own." The silence that followed was heavy. Gabriel stopped with his fork in. Mid-air, Robert almost dropped his coffee, and Beatrice, who had been invited for breakfast to discuss weekly progress, nervously adjusted her glasses. "Helen, that's ambitious," Beatrice began carefully. "You can stand with support for almost 2 minutes now, which is extraordinary. But walking alone, even if it's just a few steps, requires a level of strength and balance that I can do it. I know I can. We have 2 weeks. We can train every day." Gabriel looked at his sister with a mix of pride and concern. "Kiddo, I'd love to see you walk on my birthday. It would be the best gift in the world. But it's not worth you getting hurt trying. The important thing is that you're getting better, no matter the speed. I won't get hurt. I'll do it right, with you guys helping me. But I have to try." Robert exchanged looks with Mary. Both knew they couldn't deny that request without breaking something essential in their daughter's spirit. Beatrice thought for a long moment, doing mental calculations about muscles, balance, and risks. "All right, let's try. But under strict conditions. 4 30-minute sessions a day, no more. You follow exactly what Gabriel and I ask, no improvising. And if at any point your body shows signs of overload, we stop. No arguments." Helen agreed enthusiastically, and so began the 2 most intense weeks of her life. Mornings started at 7 with stretching and joint mobilization exercises. Gabriel worked on reflex points while telling stories about his grandmother, keeping Helen relaxed and focused. At 9, Beatrice arrived for the first strengthening session, using light weights attached to Helen's ankles to build muscle endurance. Lunch was followed by a mandatory 2-hour rest. Mary painted during this time, and Helen loved to watch, absorbing her mother's tranquility with the brush and canvas. In the afternoon, more exercises, this time focused on balance and proprioception. Gabriel created a circuit using pillows of different densities on the floor, teaching Helen's feet to adjust to varied surfaces, even though she wasn't walking on them yet. At night, lighter sessions, massages with essential oils that relaxed the muscles and prepared the body for restorative rest. Robert documented everything on video, creating a file that Beatrice would use in her presentations. He had become almost as invested in the process as the therapists, learning medical terminology and even helping with some exercises. On the 5th day of intensive training, Helen managed to take 5 steps while lightly holding Gabriel's hand before her legs gave out. It wasn't walking alone, but it was measurable progress. On the 8th day, she stood without support for 45 seconds. Her legs trembled visibly with the effort, but she held firm, eyes closed in deep concentration. On the 10th day, something unexpected happened. Helen was in the middle of an exercise when her legs simply locked up. She couldn't move them, as if the muscles had completely forgotten what to do. Panic set in. Beatrice ran every test possible, but neurologically everything was normal. It was psychological, a fear response from the body to the intense effort. "I think we pushed too hard," Beatrice admitted, frustrated with herself. "We should have respected the natural recovery limits more." Helen cried all night, convinced she had ruined everything, that she would never even be able to stand again, let alone walk. It was Gabriel who had the idea. The next morning, he woke Helen earlier than usual and took her to the garden, something they hadn't done in months. The morning was cool, the dew still glistened on the leaves, and the birds sang their greetings to the new day. "Do you remember when we first came out here?" he asked, sitting on the grass next to her wheelchair. "I remember. You showed me all the plants your grandma used. You talked about how each one had a different power. My grandma had a story she told when I was afraid I couldn't learn something. She said there was a little bird that wanted to fly, but he was so afraid of falling that his wings went stiff every time he tried to open them. How did he manage to fly then? He stopped thinking about flying and started thinking about being in the air. He stopped focusing on the fear of falling and focused on the feeling of being free. And one day, without realizing it, he was already flying." Helen understood the metaphor. "My legs locked because I'm afraid of not being able to walk on your birthday. What if we forgot about the birthday? What if we just focused on you feeling free, without the pressure of a date or expectations? But I wanted to give you that gift so badly. Kiddo, you give me that gift every day. Just by existing, just by being my sister, you've already given me everything I could ever want." That afternoon, the approach changed. There was no more counting steps or time goals. Gabriel and Beatrice worked only on the sensation, the pleasure of movement, the joy of having a body that responded. And it worked. On the 12th day, Helen's legs unlocked. She felt the control return, her body responding to her commands once again. Gabriel's birthday arrived on a sunny Saturday morning. The house was decorated with blue and white balloons, the birthday boy's favorite colors. Mrs. Vera arrived early, bringing a corn cake that Gabriel had mentioned loving. A few classmates from his new school were invited, as well as Beatrice and 2 neurologists who had become regular consultants on Helen's case. But the most anticipated moment would be in the afternoon during the cake cutting. Helen was visibly nervous. She had managed to take 7 steps without support during the previous day's practice, but with Gabriel holding her hands loosely, ready to catch her if needed, doing it alone, in front of everyone, was a whole different level of challenge. Mary noticed her daughter's anxiety and knelt beside the wheelchair. "You don't have to do this today if you don't feel ready. No one will be disappointed." "I want to do it, Mom. Not because I think I have to, but because I can. And I want Gabriel to know that he changed my life." When it was time for the birthday song, everyone gathered in the living room. The cake was on the coffee table, 9 little candles glowing softly. Gabriel was sitting on the sofa, surrounded by gifts wrapped in colorful paper. Before singing, Helen asked for everyone's attention. "Gabriel, you've given me so many things these past few months. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a brother when I was all alone. You taught me that miracles don't come from the sky. They come from the hands of people who care. So I want to give you something back." She gestured to Robert, who pushed the wheelchair to the center of the room, positioning it about 10 feet from the sofa where Gabriel was sitting. Helen took a deep breath. Mary was on her right, Robert on her left, ready to step in if needed, but not touching her. The girl placed her hands on the armrests of the chair and pushed herself up. Her legs trembled, but they held. She stood up, without support, for the first time in nearly a year. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the children invited stopped moving, sensing the importance of the moment. Then Helen took the first step, then the second. Her legs were stiff, her movements shaky, but she was walking. Alone. Third step. Fourth. Beatrice had tears streaming down her face, her hands covering her mouth in both professional and emotional shock. Fifth step. Sixth. Gabriel stood up from the sofa, his own eyes shining. Seventh step. Eighth. Helen's legs began to give way, but she was almost there. With the last burst of strength she had, she took the ninth step and fell into her brother's arms, and he caught her tight. "Happy birthday, Gabriel," she whispered, before starting to cry from exhaustion and joy. The room exploded in applause, cheers, and tears. Mrs. Vera hugged Mary, Robert filmed with shaking hands, and the neurologists talked frantically about what they had just witnessed. But Gabriel could only hold his sister, repeating over and over, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." When the emotion settled and Helen was back in her wheelchair resting, Beatrice made an announcement. "I want to present this case at the International Congress of Pediatric Neurology in June. With the family's permission, of course. What happened here is extraordinary and needs to be properly documented." Robert and Mary agreed immediately, but they looked at Gabriel. "What do you think?" Gabriel thought of his grandmother, of how she always wanted her knowledge to help as many people as possible. "I think my grandma would be happy to know that what she taught me is helping science understand better how to take care of people." And so, between tears and corn cake, between science and faith, the Miller family celebrated not just a birthday, but a rebirth. 6 months had passed since Gabriel's birthday. Helen was now walking daily, still with some instability and needing frequent rests, but she was walking. The wheelchair had been donated to an institution that cared for children with special needs, a symbolic gesture that marked the end of a chapter. The International Congress of Pediatric Neurology took place in Boston in June, bringing together experts from 17 countries. Beatrice presented Helen's case to a packed auditorium, with Gabriel sitting in the front row next to his family. The physical therapist didn't just show the clinical results. She also scientifically validated many of the ancestral techniques contained in Gabriel's grandmother's notebook. The presentation caused a stir. Neurologists who had spent decades studying similar cases wanted to understand how such a significant recovery had been possible. Some remained skeptical, but most recognized they had witnessed something that challenged the limitations modern medicine imposed on itself. After the presentation, 3 universities contacted Robert asking for permission to formally study Gabriel's methods. One of them offered to create a pilot program that would combine traditional medicine with ancestral healing techniques, using the grandmother's notebook as a foundation. Gabriel, now 9.5, was invited to participate as a consultant. He would be the youngest person in such a position in the university's history. But the fame brought challenges. Journalists began appearing in front of the house, wanting to interview the child prodigy. Some reports were respectful, focusing on the science and Helen's recovery. Others were sensationalist, calling Gabriel a miracle healer or a psychic child, titles that made him extremely uncomfortable. One night, Robert found Gabriel in the library, looking out the window at the photographers still waiting in the street. "I didn't want it to be like this," the boy said. "My grandma always said that healing should be private, between the one who cares and the one being cared for. Now everyone wants to turn it into a show." Robert sat down next to his adopted son. "I know it's hard, but think about how many children can be helped if this knowledge is shared the right way. You don't have to be the public face of this, Blick. Let Beatrice and the doctors handle that part. You just need to keep being yourself. But what if people start showing up here asking me to heal them? I'm still a kid. I'm still learning. And there are things I can't heal, diseases that go beyond what my grandma taught me. Then we set boundaries. We agree to participate in controlled research, to contribute knowledge, but we don't open our home for mass treatments. You're helping Helen because she's your sister. You're going to help science because you want to honor your grandmother. But you aren't obligated to carry the weight of everyone's hopes. The conversation brought peace to Gabriel. In the following days, Robert hired a press secretary who filtered requests and maintained the family's privacy. Beatrice became the official spokesperson for the research project, protecting Gabriel from the spotlight. In August, the family received unexpected news. Mrs. Vera called saying there was a lady at the shelter asking for Gabriel. She identified herself as Rose, a distant cousin of Gabriel's grandmother, and she had something important to deliver. When Rose arrived at the house, she brought an old wooden box, weathered by time. Her eyes filled with tears, seeing Gabriel, now well-dressed, well-fed, and clearly loved. "You look just like her when she was young," Rose said, gently touching the boy's face. "Your grandmother asked me to keep this and give it to you when you found your true family. She said I'd know when the time was right." Inside the box were more notebooks, letters, old photographs, and a small bundle wrapped in fabric. Gabriel opened it with trembling hands and found a simple necklace, a green stone tied to a leather cord. "This stone belonged to my great-grandmother," Rose explained. "She wore it when she worked as a midwife. She said the stone absorbed the mother's fear and gave courage to the children being born. Your grandmother wanted you to have it, to remember that you were born to help others be born again." Gabriel put on the necklace and felt a comforting weight on his chest, like a hug from the grandmother he would never see again, but who had never truly left him. The extra notebooks revealed even more knowledge. Treatments for conditions Gabriel didn't even know his grandmother had mastered. Stories of cases she had treated over 50 years, and reflections on ethics and limits in the art of healing. Beatrice spent weeks cataloging everything, working with anthropologists and medical historians to contextualize that treasure of folk wisdom. In October, on Helen's 7th birthday, she ran for the first time. It was only 60 feet in the garden, her steps still awkward but full of life, but it was the most celebrated 60 feet in that house. Gabriel ran beside her, holding her hand, not because she needed support, but because siblings share moments like that together. That night, Robert made an announcement at the dinner table. "Mary and I have talked a lot, and we've decided we want to do something bigger with all of this. We're going to start a foundation, a rehabilitation center that combines modern medicine with traditional healing techniques. It will be free for families who can't afford it, and it will be a place for serious research, not empty promises." The project would take years to fully realize, but the seed was planted. Robert sold part of his shares in his tech company to fund the construction. Mary went back to work, using her connections to bring in the best professionals. Gabriel continued his studies, now at a specialized school for gifted children, where his intelligence and sensitivity were nurtured. He made true friends and learned that being different didn't mean being alone. Helen entered regular school for the first time, without a wheelchair, without stigma. In the first few days, there was curiosity from classmates about her past, but soon she was just another kid, running at recess, complaining about homework, living fully. Beatrice was invited to lead the medical team at the future foundation. She accepted without hesitation, seeing it as the opportunity to unite the two things she loved most: science and humanity. Mrs. Vera became a regular volunteer at the house, helping to organize Gabriel's grandmother's notebooks and sharing stories about the community he came from, ensuring his roots were never forgotten. 2 years passed. Gabriel was 11, Helen 8. The Hope Integrative Rehabilitation Center, named after the virtue that had saved that family, opened its doors on a sunny spring morning. The building was located in a green area on the outskirts of the city, not far from where Gabriel's grandmother had worked as a healer. It had physical therapy rooms equipped with state-of-the-art technology, therapeutic gardens with all the medicinal herbs cataloged in the notebooks, spaces for art therapy, and a medical library that included both scientific treatises and traditional knowledge from various cultures. At the inauguration, families were present who had been selected for the pilot program. Children with neurological conditions, spinal cord injuries, cerebral palsy. There were also researchers, skeptical doctors who wanted to see for themselves, and journalists interested in stories of hope. Robert gave the opening speech. This center exists because a family learned that healing doesn't come from science alone or faith alone, but from the union of both. It comes from love, from persistence, from hands that refuse to let go. My son Gabriel taught me that true knowledge doesn't need a diploma, but it does need a heart. My daughter Helen taught me that miracles are built day after day, step by step. And my wife Mary taught me that the greatest strength lies in admitting when we need help. Gabriel was in the back of the auditorium, preferring not to be the center of attention. But when Helen called him up to the stage, he couldn't refuse. When asked what he would like to say, Gabriel held his great-grandmother's necklace and spoke with the firm voice of someone who knew exactly who he was. My grandma always said we don't choose the gifts we receive, but we choose what we do with them. I choose to use what she taught me to help other children have the chance Helen had. I don't promise miracles, because a miracle is just another name for hard work done with a lot of love. But I promise that every child who comes through here will be treated the way my family treated me, with respect, with patience, and with the belief that everyone deserves a chance to stand up. The applause was long and emotional. Beatrice cried openly, Robert hugged his son with pride, and Mary held Helen, who was now standing by her side, firm and strong. In the following months, the center began to produce results. Not every case had a happy ending like Helen's. Medicine still had its limits. But every child who regained some function, every family that found hope again, every small victory was celebrated as the triumph it was. Gabriel continued to be a consultant, working a few days a week after school. He didn't treat patients alone. He always worked in a team with physical therapists and doctors. But his sensitivity in understanding where patients felt blocks, his ability to explain complex techniques simply, and his gentle way of making scared children trust the process all became an essential part of the program. Helen, inspired by her own journey, decided that when she grew up, she would be a doctor specializing in pediatric rehabilitation. She studied with Beatrice whenever possible, absorbing knowledge with the passion of someone who knows what it's like to need that knowledge. On a quiet December afternoon, 5 years after that first meeting in Robert's office, the family gathered in the center's garden to plant a tree. It was a golden maple, a tree that would one day turn bright yellow, reminiscent of the flowers near Gabriel's grandmother's old home. As they planted, Robert read aloud a passage from one of the notebooks. True healing happens when we stop trying to fix what is broken and start nurturing what never died. Hope, the will to live, the love that connects us to one another. Bodies recover when spirits grow strong, and spirits grow strong when they find a purpose greater than their own pain. Gabriel placed soil around the sapling with the same hands that had helped Helen walk again, that had comforted dozens of other children, and that carried a legacy that was now multiplying. Helen poured water, her legs steady, her smile radiant. Mary and Robert watched their children, no longer united only by tragedy, but by a shared purpose. In that moment, under the golden late afternoon sun, surrounded by dedicated professionals and hopeful families, the Miller family was no longer defined by their losses or their pain. They were defined by their choices, the choice to believe when everything seemed impossible, the choice to love beyond the barriers of blood, and the choice to turn suffering into service. The boy with the healing hands had found not just a family, but a path. And along that path, he had planted seeds that would continue to grow long after his own hands could no longer work. Because his grandmother's greatest teaching wasn't in the techniques or the recipes. It was in the certainty that love applied with wisdom is the most powerful medicine there is. And that medicine, unlike all others, never runs out. It only multiplies, passing from hand to hand, from heart to heart, healing not just bodies, but the world, one kind act at a time. Helen looked at her brother and whispered, Thank you for making me walk again." Gabriel smiled and replied, "Thank you for making me believe that family is who chooses to stay, not just who shares your blood." And there, in that garden that smelled of wet earth and renewed hope, under a tree that would one day bloom like 1,000 little suns, the story that began with despair ended with love. Because in the end, it was always about that. About hands that refused to let go, about hearts that refused to harden, and about a family that refused to accept that some miracles are impossible. The end. If Gabriel and Helen's journey touched your heart, know that there are thousands of stories like this waiting to be discovered. Stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, of families coming together against all odds, and of love winning where logic said there was no more hope. If you enjoyed this narrative, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any emotional stories, and tell us in the comments, do you believe in the power of family unity and unconditional love to transform lives? Your story, your comment, might inspire someone going through a difficult time. Until the next emotional journey.